I'm thinking about this lately. Do you think we've gotten to a point, gamer culture has gotten to a point where people are taking games too seriously?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of uh, gamers, I guess, they only know gaming. Like they're not really exposed to other forms of media or other art forms. Um, and when all they know is gaming, I mean, they kind of have to take it seriously, but they don't see how just silly and childish a lot of games are, and they wind up taking them seriously because they don't see it.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing about games, and I don't know if it's true of other media as well. I'm just assuming that it's not, because in my personal experience, it's not. But with books, I like to read a large variety of books, and with movies, I like to watch a lot of different movies, and with video games, I like to play games from every genre. But as a teacher, when I talk to my kids about video games, they only want to talk to me about Call of Duty, things like that. And to me,
Hmm.
the kids, their idea of video games is locked into one, sometimes two genres. Like some of my kids like racing games,
Hmm.
and you get that idea that that their experience with games, because it is so limited, they don't understand that a lot of games are trying to be funny with an over-the-top character like Duke Nukem.
Right.
It's almost like they believe that that character is supposed to be a really cool character when really he's completely lame and kind of pathetic. And that's the
Right. Yeah.
charm. You love him because he's a big dumb idiot.
They think every game is playing it straight.
Yes. Yeah, that's a much more simpler way. I don't know what I was trying to say. But yeah, they think that every game is a serious affair because they've grown up playing nothing but like Call of Duties and Gears of War, where it's just so super serious, even though it's not even like especially in Gears of War,
Hmm.
it's a completely ridiculous premise
It
and
is.
just
It's an action movie. That's all it is.
yeah.
I've games are so, by and large, they're so like artistically inept, which is why if you anyone who plays games for like story and storytelling and narrative, I don't think they've been exposed to like really great storytelling.
That's interesting because I would totally disagree with you.
Really?
Completely disagree with you.
Okay.
That's really interesting though that you would bring that up because to me games have at least the potential to be a much more powerful medium than
Oh,
any.
I think the potential's there. I don't think it's been done ever. Well, maybe a little bit in the past couple of years.
I think it's been done. It's just not getting the attention it deserves, which is crazy because you know how you were talking about people taking games too seriously.
Yeah.
I think people take games too seriously because just gamers in general are begging to be taken seriously. With the whole games or art kind of conversations going on, and how you have someone like Ebert come out and say that games can never be art, and everyone just freaks out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think gamers as a whole, they want what they love to be taken seriously, and that's why they take it so seriously. They
Right.
make such a big deal over these things that really aren't special or different. But I feel like a game like going back to Super Metroid, that to me is narrative storytelling at its finest because it gives you so much to look at and to listen to, and yet you kind of create most of that story by yourself. So when you come across that soldier, I'm assuming it's a soldier, with these creatures that seem to be kind of eating him right before Kraid's lair, you develop the story for that guy. That's all you. And
Yeah.
when I'm playing Portal, I get a sense of what's going on based on what people have scribbled on the walls and based on the things that Gladys is saying, but I don't know who I am or where I came from or why I'm there. I'm inventing that story in my own head, and I don't know what the world outside is like. Again, I'm inventing that story for myself, or what the history of this company is, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
what I was a little disappointed in Portal 2 because I thought they went into a couple of things more than I wanted them to.
Oh, I agree about that.
But to
Portal
me,
2 was. I just want to say this one thing that Yeah, Portal 1 is so minimalist in your storytelling that, like you were saying, everything is like a mystery, and you just invent all these. Uh, it's more exciting when you don't know. And Portal 2, you learn too much.
Right.
But go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm just saying that I feel like games do a much better job of storytelling in that they involve you in the process. Whereas if I'm watching a movie, most things are explained. Like, if I'm watching The Avengers, there's a really good reason for why everything is in The Avengers. They don't show you anything other than, what you see. Whereas in a game or in a book even, I can kind of explore those things in my own head and create a background. And
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
right. Games, you're a participant in everything that's going on, and you can actively change the story. Especially with a game like The Walking Dead, where you literally do just that with your actions. Has it been done incredibly well? No, and I know you love movies, I think games do a better job at telling stories than movies.
No, they don't. They just don't. I'll tell you why I think that. I'm going to make a distinction between video game and interactive media here. I think the interactivity, the potential for storytelling and interactive software is huge, and it may be the best narrative form when it gets ironed out. The narrative potential in a game, however, I think is severely limited, and the narrative potential there doesn't even come close to, other forms of narrative, like a movie or a novel or something. Because in a game, you're limited to stories that involve winning, because for it to be a game at all, there has to be a win condition. And, well, I guess you could be ironic and have the story like, you could have the player satisfy the win conditions, but have the story like, the classic example is like you beat a boss in the game and then something like terrible happens in the story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you could like be ironic that way, but I don't think I wouldn't classify that as good storytelling. I think, something more cohesive than that is like of a higher quality. So yeah, like since game narratives are limited in that way, being tied to win conditions, being tied to, defeating the enemy or completing the objective or whatever. Okay. Did you see Monsters University?
No.
Okay, that story is about a guy who realizes he's not going to be able to fulfill his dream. It's about the green guy, Mike Wazowski,
mm-hmm.
and he wants to be a scarer. And the movie's about him realizing, look, I'm not cut out for this. I'm going to have to find out what my talents really are. You couldn't tell that story in a game. Not that you couldn't tell it interactively. I think you could. Through some interactive software, but you could never tell that story well tying a win condition to it, because he doesn't win. He has to realize something that he can't do. He doesn't. You could never tie that to completing an objective or winning. So the games just don't have the subtleties to telling a whole lot of different types of stories.
Okay. I'm going to disagree with you, even though I have not seen Monsters University. I saw the Monsters, Inc.
Well, that's just an example. You could think of, like The Godfather. Could you tell The Godfather in a video game format?
Oh, absolutely.
No, really.
Yes.
Like, come on, a game, not. And I'm drawing a distinction between game and interactive. Remember.
I totally understand, and here's
Okay.
why. And I think what we're going to have to do eventually is draw the line, because I feel like movies are good at telling some stories and games are good at telling. So when we use the word stories, we're talking about all stories, and I think I think different media do it better than others. Like, I feel like music can tell some pretty decent stories as well.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But let me just put this out here. All stories follow kind of a basic formula. You have your exposition in the beginning, your rising action, your climax, your falling action, and then your resolution. When the story is resolved, that main problem, that conflict is finally resolved at the end.
Uh-huh.
Video games, you can guide the character through that process. Does it necessarily have to be complicated? No. But a game like... Oh, geez, let's come up with an example. Well, a game like Perfect Dark. Perfect Dark, we're both familiar with. That tells a story. Even Super Mario Brothers has a really superficial story in it. There's a problem. Here's the events that lead to its resolution. So movies do that very, very well, as do books. You start at the beginning, you introduce your characters and your setting and the problem, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. I feel like games can follow the same formula. And your win condition that you have in video games is really just whatever the protagonist needs to do in a movie to get to the resolution. That's his win condition. So Mike in Monsters, Inc., and again, I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like he's on his quest to find out what he's good at, or to, what was it you were saying, to become a scarer?
Yeah, he goes to college and he wants to be a scarer, which is, and you've seen the original, right? You said
Yeah.
you had. Okay, like Sully in the original is a scarer because he goes into the kid's bedroom and tries to get the energy. That's what Mike wants to do, but he's just not scary. Like, he's a little guy, you know. He doesn't have like the natural athleticism to do that. And in the movie, he has to. He like. No matter how hard he studies, no matter how much he learns about scaring, at the end of the day, he has to realize that he'll never be able to do this. He'll never win at it.
So, is that then his real conflict? Not so much that he wants to be a scarer. The problem then would be Mike wants to become better at scaring children. Is that really the problem, or is the problem that Mike needs to find what he's good at?
That's not really how I saw it, honestly. I thought the story was about
Being okay with who you are?
yeah, yeah.
Right, so you could have a game where in order to win, you have to be okay with who you are.
But how do you do that?
Well, not easily.
Mm.
And I think that's a story that lends itself better to movies. But, and I guess that's what I mean when I say we have to draw the line and talk about, you know, which stories are we really talking about here, because some stories lend themselves better to different media.
Yeah, because like if you tried to put that story in a game, I think both the game and the story would suffer because they're so incongruous.
Yes,
Because,
I'll
like,
agree with you.
Let's say you could come up with, like, you know, an interesting win condition that was fun. You still have the issue of challenge in a game, and challenge is kind of what makes a game interesting. And that's another issue I have with games and storytelling is when you have challenge, which is fun in a game, when you mix narrative into that, you know, when you're reading a story or you're watching a movie, you don't want to, like, you don't want the movie, you don't want to close the book and be forced to, you know, do a math problem or something in order to read the rest of the book.
Okay.
And if, like, a win condition's tied to that, in order to keep the pace of the narrative up, it has to be made really easy, you know? So...
Well, let's talk about Star Fox. That's a game that has a really good story. Now,
yeah, it's a game that tells a story really well.
yeah, that's a game where, like, I don't remember, I think it's Sector X you're in, and if you don't complete the win condition in a certain amount of time, then Slippy becomes in trouble, and you need to go on a new mission to get Slippy. That not only changes the game as far as the setting, but you learn some more information about Slippy through that event. You learn that he really wants to prove himself, that you're taking too long beating that giant robot in Sector X, and he wants to dive in there. You learn that Slippy can be a little careless, that he has something to prove. And when you're off to rescue them and you hear Falco talk about him, you learn some more about Slippy and his kind of role in that group based on what people are saying about him and what situation he got himself into and how apologetic he is and how grateful he is that you have come to rescue him. And I feel like
I think I see what you're saying. That like, for every time you don't win, every time you don't meet the win condition in the game, the story doesn't stop. It keeps going. It like branches off into the lose condition story.
Right. Your failures become the character's failures, and that has an impact on the narrative.
Okay,
and,
sure.
You know, you might... Whereas when you're watching a movie, you are not Fox McCloud. Fox McCloud is a character on the screen, whereas when I'm playing the game, I have a sense of guilt. Like, I let Slippy get into this situation. It's my responsibility. And as a viewer, I'm more invested in the story, and it means more to me. It becomes something personal. And I feel bad for what's happening to Slippy. And if the game was deep enough, I might be able to treat him differently. Like I might go to rescue him quicker. If I could speak to Falco, I might stand up for him more because I feel in a sense of attachment. So I feel like games are able to do things with win conditions that have an impact.
I think they absolutely can. But I think within that, I think Star Fox 64 gets away with it. Does such a good job because its story is one that really suits a game really well. You know, it's about blowing things up. It's about it's a story that's very much about winning. So when you lose, it doesn't feel like it's like drawing the narrative or anything like that. Yeah.
Or take something like Fire Emblem, where when you screw up, a character's gone forever, and then that impacts not only other characters, but future scenarios. So maybe if I go to another scenario and I have a certain character in my party, things will go one way, but that character died, so he's not there.
Oh, but that story's still comfortably in the... It's still a winning kind of story.
Yeah, it's a winning kind of story. So I guess what you're saying is that...
It's really hard for a game to tell a story outside of that framework.
Yeah, I guess my argument is that every game, every story has a win condition.
I don't think they do, though. Maybe? Because, like, some stories... another sort of hurdle, I think, in game narrative is you have to be that character. And I think that limits the kinds of stories you can tell, because what if... do you watch Breaking Bad?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, well... what's a good example? I guess I'll go to The Godfather. Like, Michael Corleone is not the best guy. I mean, The Godfather is a really powerful story because you see someone, he tries to do good by his family, and he ends up becoming this bad person. I don't know how you could tie that to a game because, number one, it's like a tragic ending. He ends up all alone at the end of Godfather 2. And that, I don't know how you could tie a win condition to that. And also... would you really want to be Michael Corleone? Would you really want to play as this guy?
Oh, I think, yes, absolutely. He is powerful. And I think that's something that video games give us that, people don't actually get to experience in life that often, is that kind of power and respect that he commands.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that story is probably better suited to movies. But again, there is a win condition there, and that win condition is, help out your family. There are consequences to it.
Oh, but he fails, though.
He fails.
Well,
yeah.
I guess that's arguable, really. That's really debatable because you could say that he in the end he protects them because he's powerful, but he loses them too because he's so distant.
Right, and I mean, he fails, but at the same time, like you said, he did what he set out to do. And I don't think games should be afraid to explore those kind of stories where doing what you're supposed to do actually results in something negative for the main character.
Sure. Okay. I've really got to go, but I'm going to think about. I'm going to look for win conditions in stories. I'm going to think a lot about that.
Just think about the standard structure of a story: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution.
Okay, I will for sure.